To break your heart, but we're already behind schedule on the flood control program because of resource constraints that we have had. I have inherited a flood control program that is behind schedule. As I've told you, even what we are doing is just about 2% of what we should be doing in the Greater Accra region.
The last time we checked, the amount of money involved runs into billions of cedis.
It's $200 million. So yes, if you do the conversion, it'll run into billions. It's a $200 million project funded by the World Bank. That's a GhIE project. But what has actually been released or spent is not up to $200 million. But the implementation has been slow for a number of reasons. I think just last week I met the contractors and the coordinator, Dr. Ohene, to urge them to quicken the pace of work with what they are doing now. I mean, if you go to the Kaneshie areas, for example, all the work that needs to be done there is not even been done yet.
Yes.
And so until it is done, and to do that, we have to do the engagement with the people, pay compensation to project-affected people, secure the land lots that we need. We have to do detention ponds that will arrest water coming from the hilly areas of the Greater Accra region. So there's a lot of work to be done. Not all of it has been done. We are running as much as we can. I'm sure you see me every time with the contractors, chasing them, trying to get their payments for them so that they can deliver. But we are behind schedule.
So therefore, we'll have to endure it for
at least schedule
for the next few years ahead of us.
We are behind schedule. We will do our best with the resources and time that we have, and we'll make a case for more resources and some more seriousness in getting the work done so that in the shortest possible time, it will be a thing of the past. Remember that flooding is a combination of things. A, the water channels to evacuate water, and two, a certain level of rainfall. When you have inordinate amounts of rainfall,
there's nothing you can do
even
about
with
it.
The best channels. I mean, look at what's happening in Dubai.
I was just coming to that.
Yeah. So I think we must also have that.
Supposed well-planned city.
We must have that at the back of our mind. So we will do our best with the resources and time that we have. We are behind schedule, and we will move as quickly as we can within the constraints.
So that was my conversation with the Works and Housing Minister last week. And already we're beginning to experience the rains. And from what the Metro Department is telling us, it's going to be quite heavy this year. So the flood issues obviously going to dominate the headlines for some time to come. But what are the facts as we have it? Our research team here at GhIE News, they've put together some data which best capture the severity of the lack of resources to deal with the flood. Data analyst Isaac Kofi Ajay joins me in studio with more. So Kofi, this information we have, this is a cabinet presentation done by the Works and Housing Minister, presented to the President Akufo-Addo's cabinet, detailing what the situation, what must be done going forward. Walk us through them.
Well, so Elton, just like you spoke to Kojo, the issue has to do with money. And just like our power situation, our floods, if we really want to solve the seasonal flood, we need some sort of resources, money, to be able to actually combat this situation. Now, we have here a cabinet document prepared somewhat 2021, and it details the total amount of money that we will need to sort of, solve the problem a bit or try to put the problem under some sort of control. And this starts from 2021 and 2024. And you spoke to Kojo and he said that this program actually is behind time.
Right.
And since we did this in 2021, this was a projection. So in actual terms, since it's monetary and we've seen how the city has misbehaved in the last 2 or 3 months, it tells you that even the 2.7 billion Ghana cedis that we've actually, anticipated or estimated that could solve the problem in 2024 could be high. Now, you begin to look at the total amount of money or the allocation from 2021 and you see how it changes. It tells you that going forward, we will need more money in 2025, 2026 to solve the flood situation.
So, for example, in 2021, we required 888.3 million
Ghana cedis. Then it moves to 2.4 billion Ghana cedis. Then we have 2.6 billion cedis, and now we are looking at somewhere at least 2.7 billion.
Currently, if you want to deal with the flooding issue, the monetary value, how much we require, will be 2.7 billion Ghana cedis.
Yeah, so if we are very generous or diplomatic and we want to convert to dollars, $1 to 10 cedis, we should be around, let's say, $270 million. But this moment, where are we going to find that $275 million to solve the problem? We know it isn't just flooding that's the situation, the problem at the moment. we have the energy sector crisis that we are currently looking for money to solve that one as well. But whenever there's flooding, the Greater Accra region takes majority of the hits.
Right.
And you could see that in terms of the allocation, majority in 2024 would have to go to the Greater Accra region. The biggest percentage, 890.2 million Ghana cedis is needed to solve the flooding situation in the Greater Accra region. The Ashanti region follows with 350.3, and you see them there. All of them in 2024, you need close to about 2.7 billion Ghana cedis to solve the problem. Let's look at other regions that featured in that cabinet document. So we have the Volta region being the least. But it's still an important area because some sort of flooding occurs there. We just saw the spillage last year, and we are still trying to find monies to relocate people and also reimburse people. But you need about 160.7 million Ghana cedis to also help solve the problem in the Volta region. So in total, Elton, at least some 2.7 billion Ghana cedis is needed.
What is required. And now, just also going through the cabinet memo, they say that the estimated cost, that's $5 billion of fixing a drainage network, increases with each year of underinvestment. The benefit of investing now far outweigh the cost. The value of assets at risk in Greater Accra region alone is $3.2 billion, could quadruple to $12.8 billion by 2050 if steps are not taken now to improve resilience. By extension, the total value of assets at risk across the country could run into tens of billions of dollars.
Absolutely. So it means that the earlier you solve the problem or you put measures in place, the better. And the more you wait, the more the cost also balloons. Because this is the at least situation. We are even talking about possibly drainage. But per what you are looking at, there's also some sort of estimation from the IMF, and it's in line with this $5 billion that you are quoting. We don't have the money, but we want to solve the problem. But how do we do it?
How do we do
that
it?
we'll get answers.
We'll get answers. But again, the crucial part of all of this conversation is that after this cabinet presentation, the minister followed up with a letter to the finance minister, where he makes the point that the ministry applied for issuance of commencement certificate to commit the government of Ghana to the tune of 888 million Ghana cedis for the implementation of the 2021 Emergency National Flood Control Program to address the serious flooding challenges being experienced across the country. At a presentation to Cabinet on the state of the country drainage infrastructure, the minister detailed the urgent need to embark on the 2021 Flood Control Program. But interestingly, the minister comes to the conclusion that the finance minister, despite 3 notifications on the same matter, not a single cedi has been disbursed to the ministry for them to undertake this particular
but this is also a ministry that, each year they receive a lot of allocations from the budget, but the problem has to do with the disbursement. And clearly, if we do not disburse the money, work will not actually continue, because we've seen some work being done, but there are arrears to even clear. So we are not even done talking about arrears clearance and to talk about new projects. And so in as much as the finance ministry is there to help all ministries, when they are constrained, you see that it only doesn't happen to this part of the problem, but also the energy sector as well, where currently we know how much the finance ministry would have to cough up to pay for the top-ups, about 1.3 billion Ghana cedis. And we need to solve the problem, but it has to do with money.
Kofi, thank you very much. And in the words of the Current Minister for Works and Housing, Kojo Opongme, we are absolutely late in dealing with the flooding matter in this country. But what can be done going forward? In the studio this afternoon, as we explore this matter and to try and find solution to this perennial issue, is Engineer Kwabena Bimpon, President of the Ghana Institution of Engineering. Mr. Bimpon, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And of course, David Nyante, also from the institution, also joins me in the studio. Mr. Nyante, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And it's always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
So we've laid the facts bare.
Right.
From your engineering point of view, are you surprised with the figures that we put across before we go into your statement and recommendations that you put across?
Well, thank you very much for having us. And the figures that were put out there, I'm not in the least surprised, in the sense that if you underinvest over a long time, at the end of the day, it is like a moving target. It's not going to wait for you.
Right.
The problems are not going to wait for you. You would have to probably double up to meet the challenges. So just like your analyst said, if you don't invest now, you invest later, and it keeps on ballooning. So yes, it's not surprising that we have such figures required. But I just want to make a point that we cannot continue just to construct drains out of the problem. Let me just end it there. We cannot construct drains out of our problems. We need to do something more.
More about it. Mr. Yante, is it an issue of lack of proper planning, or just that, I mean, in terms of priority, it is somewhere else instead of dealing with this perennial issue?
Well, our urban development is not complete. It's late, and like he said, it keeps being postponed and postponed because of money issues and things like that. So that is one issue. But there are other issues to the drainage situation, which includes our behaviors and also awareness. We need to be aware of what the situation is. For instance, which areas in Accra are prone to flooding? Do the residents there know? In case that place is getting flooded, what do they do? What contact numbers do they have to, call? And so on and so forth. These are things that can mitigate it. Now all we can do is to work towards mitigation, and protecting lives and property. That is the focus we have. We cannot fold our arms and say we are late with construction, therefore we will do nothing. We still need to protect life and property.
You have warned that there's a possibility that people may lose their lives, property may be washed away and all of that. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, luckily I've been around for more than 50 years.
Right.
And if you look at the papers, okay, you'll realize that for decades and probably centuries, Accra has been flooding. And now a place like Kumasi wasn't experiencing flooding. But now look at the list that you put out. Out of the 16 regions, about 14 are experiencing flooding. And even the one about Ho, I've been in Ho and I've seen flooding. So it tells you that it is not, you don't need a soothsayer to tell you that this is going to happen. It happens every year. And if you look at the data, you don't need anybody you don't need to be clairvoyant to know what is going to happen. And it is because we have not actively involved, as David said, the populace to have an understanding of the situation. Maybe we have an understanding. Maybe we have made attempts to solve the infrastructural problems, because the infrastructural problems keep on increasing.
Right.
And remember that climate change is also another thing. Whilst you are trying to solve based on the data that you had for the past 40 years, now climate change has come to add onto it. So now the volumes are increasing.
Right.
And once these volumes are increasing and you have not done anything to it, obviously your problems, if it were X in the past, is going to be 2X. And this is where we as an institution would not want us to fold our arms and say, well, we have not constructed drains. And remember the statement that I made, that we cannot construct drains out of our challenges.
Out of our issues.
Yes, I know GhIE project is in.
Right.
But then there are other mitigation measures, which may be engineering and may also be the social aspect. Which,
so let's start from the engineering aspect, because this is your area.
Now,
have we done, in terms of the way we've engineered the cities, is it to your appreciation, or we've gone it completely wrong?
Maybe David should come in before.
Well, it's dynamic, and there's improvement all the time. But what do we have, and what can we make of it? As of now, most of our roadside drains are choked, are silted up. When it rains, you know that the capacity of the roads are narrowed, become smaller because these drains are silted up. The water cannot flow through, and then it's on the road. The capacity is already reduced. So those are things we need to look at the infrastructure we have. How can we make use of those infrastructure we have? How do we clean them? How do we make them more efficient? So that we mitigate the issues that might come with not having all the infrastructure we require or we desire to put in place. So those are some of the issues. We already have some bit of infrastructure. That bit of infrastructure we are not maintaining properly. So we are not even getting the benefit of that. So how then do we add on to it? Probably we add on to it with more infrastructure, and then we fill it up with rubbish.
Right.
So it is our behaviors and then our awareness, how to behave properly, how to all get involved. This is a societal thing. We are not talking of only Accra. Takoradi is also flooding.
But the level of engineering, is it up to standard?
The level of
engineering,
there is the engineering,
the engineering foundation. Is it up to standard?
To look at a drainage system is quite a complex thing. You cannot just look at a section of it and say this is up to standard. That will require, some.
I'm asking that question because the questions always come about whether or not our engineers have helped us in dealing with this matter, or this flooding may be an indictment on the competence of our engineers. That's why I'm asking the foundation, the engineering aspect of it.
Let me come in here.
Right.
Look, when it comes to drainage, it works in the form of a network. You cannot tackle one part of the equation and expect that the whole problem will be resolved. It starts with planning. Have our cities been properly planned to ensure that when it rains, the waters find their ways into a logical outflow? If you do not have the capacity, or the drains do not have the capacity that is required, you probably would want to hold on by putting in detention ponds. These were all planned. If you go to the Pantan area, okay, there were detention ponds or detention areas which were earmarked for detention. That is, when the waters come from the Bray Hills, I'm just using Accra as an example, they have to be held. When the rain event has passed, then we release it gradually to get into the sea. Remember that the southern part of Ghana and, of course, Accra, some areas are below sea level.
Right.
Now, when there is high tide, the waters that are flowing in through the drainage channels are unable to get into the sea. And therefore, there is what we call a backflow. When there's backflow, it's going to cause flooding. But like David said, it is good. We need to have all these drainage structures and all that. And I was telling him, before we came here, that I just came back from China, in the Guangdong province, yesterday. And I was with a Chinese lady, and she showed me a picture of flooding. I said, hey, does it flood also in China?
Well, we'll come to deal with recent development, including even Dubai.
Yes,
which is supposed to be one of the most well-structured cities in the world. But recent events, as exposed their readiness to deal with this matter. It floods also in the United States and the UK.
Yes, in the UK.
So we'll look at...
But I just wanted to make a point that it is not only about engineering. Of course, if you talk about the social aspect, maybe they are not doing that. But then there's another thing, and that is what David again mentioned, about preparedness, that when such an event occurs, what do you do?
And that will be my next question.
Yes. So what we are saying is that we need to know the flood-prone areas. We need to get people to be aware. The forecasting, we need to get data out there in terms of forecasting these heavy rains so that people in flood-prone areas can take action. And in times like that, what do they do? Do they understand what they have to do? Do I know the risk areas in Accra so that when it is raining or there's impending rain, I don't drive into that area?
Are you able to tell us some of the risk areas in Accra?
Well, we all know that Jolu is a risk area, but I do not know all the risk areas in Accra. But it's good to know. So we should share this information. This is information that I believe NADMO has, and they need to make it available to the public.
Circle always surprises me because of this, the outdoor drain, which is so big. I mean, from a layman point of view, you should be able to take as much water as possible. Yet, the slightest rain and then the whole place is flooded.
Remember that the outdoor drain is not draining only Accra. And I give an example, it's coming all the way from the eastern region, from the Kapim hills. So all rains that fall within that area would find their way through the tributaries of the Odo River all the way into the sea. So it is not also about the size. And Accra, the Odo River is less than don't use engineering figure, but it is almost flat. Then that's the best thing to say. It is almost flat. And when it is flat, that is where you have sedimentation. Because remember that a lot of our areas are unpaved. So when it rains, it carries all the silt load or the sand into the drains. And when the water is flowing very fast, the material or the sand or silt will be in suspension. But when it gets to an area where the slopes are very gentle or probably flat, then it will begin to settle. And that is why you would have a big drain or a big channel like Odo, but it is probably half silted.
Half silted.
And if it's half silted, the capacity is reduced.
And the responsibilities will be placed on who? I remember, I think in 2021 or earlier than that, I accompanied the president to the silting process at that time.
Yes.
As a presidential correspondent. The engineer who was working on the process updated the president and told him that the end game, is to deal with this flooding issue. If he went on to made promise to the effect that they were going to turn the place into like the Thames of London.
Yes.
Where we'll have speedboats and restaurants along the river. Now, several years on, the place is as bad as it was.
Yeah, it has to be a continuous improvement process. You cannot work on it today and go to sleep for the rest of the year. All our infrastructure has to be maintained on a continuous basis, and that is the only way you can benefit from the infrastructure you put in place. So if you put in the infrastructure and you don't maintain it, you don't get the benefit of it. You understand? So we need to maintain our infrastructure. What we have already, let's desilt it, and we are calling on all the agencies with those responsibilities to take action. Deal with the desilting, create the awareness, give the information on the safe havens if there are flood risk areas, so that people know what to do. We shouldn't be surprised when the rains come in and there are flooding in certain areas. We should know those areas. So it shouldn't come to us as a surprise. We should know how we prepared towards it, and if we weren't very efficient in that, next year we learn from it and improve upon it, and so on and so forth. So that is what we are calling for. That let's all be mindful that the rains are coming, and with climate change, the rains are heavier, more frequent, and the durations are longer. You could have very severe rainfall.
But Mr. President, in the last 10 years, let's say from 2014 up until now, will we say there's been improvement or the situation is getting out of hand? And so we'll put on our screens the recommendations that you have come up with so that you walk us through. But in the last 10 years, and the volume we've recorded, the destruction and everything, will you say that we have improved, or we are stagnating, or the situation is getting out of hand?
Well, when the Odo drain or channel was constructed, I happened to have worked on the Circular Chimota Road, and I remember very clearly in around 2003. Okay, so that's about 20 years ago.
Right.
And also, my old man, my father has a furniture shop, Cape Pond Furniture Works, around the blow-up area. And ever since I was a child, I've known that area to flood. Our workshop always flooded. But then after that construction, it eased, which means that it was working. The engineering solution that was given was working. Down the line, it happens again. It has started and now it's getting. So it's more like a sinusoidal wave. But then it demands that we desilt our channels. It is not enough. That's why I said it's not enough to construct. You can construct 1,000 meters of drains. But until you maintain it, for it to be at it was at the time of construction, then you are doing nothing. But let me also add that the Odo River, and for that matter, other drains drain into the sea. That is our outfall point.
Right.
Now, they have to go through lagoons. The Korle Lagoon, if you remember the Korle Ecological Restoration Project, and that's what I believe the engineer was talking about, having the Thames of London. Even Thames also has its own challenges. But then, that project did not come on. You know that there were challenges, legal challenges by the Fadama, those who were, those, I don't want to call them squatters, but then obviously that's what they are. And because of that, that project, which was a Kuwaiti fund or so, did not happen. Now, you can construct all the drains that you want. Where is it going to outfall into? It gets to the Korle, and for that matter, other lagoons, and it's choked. Apart from the challenge that we have with the control, measures. I studied in the Netherlands, and they have flood control measures where they have, apart from their dikes, they have at the end, that is where it drains into the sea. When there's high tide, it is closed. When we have low tide, it is allowed to open. But if we do not have a detention pond, that will not happen. Something like that was constructed by, I think, TASEC some time back, but it's not working. It's not working. You remember when the floods, in the water, lower basin happened, there was a particular, gate that is flood mitigation gate that was not open.
Exactly.
Later on, it was open.
Yes.
So there are systems which are in place, engineering systems. But these systems, we love to construct, but when it comes to maintaining and ensuring that they continue to work,
it becomes an issue. All right, we'll come back to deal with the role of government, the role of the assembly, and then the general public. NADMO is getting itself ready to deal with the matter. But you've got some recommendations that you are making to the Ghanaian public, and we're going to have that on our screens very soon. My guest this afternoon, representatives from the Ghana Institution of Engineering, and among the recommendations that they are making as we prepare to welcome the rains, they recommend that metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies promptly repair and silt existing drainage structures to prevent overflow and blockage. Is it the case that most of them are blocked?
Oh.
Mr. Yante.
I think that is obvious. If you walk around, you see most of the drains are choked. Most of them, are quite blocked. I think that we need to maintain. And
the reason is financing, or the commitment is simply not there, or we don't place so much premium on the effects of flooding because we become accustomed to it.
Yes, we wait until it happens and it's like we are surprised. But how are you surprised when your drains are blocked and choked with silt and other garbage? They need to be maintained so that you can get the benefit of those drainage structures. And if you're not cleaning and maintaining them, why are you surprised the place your areas are getting flooded? So those are some of the issues. These drains and drainage structures, the culverts and all those things need to be maintained properly.
But the point is that the assemblies, they have a key role to play in this particular discussion.
Precisely.
I remember when this flooding became so pronounced, some people died as a result. President Kufuor had visited some of the areas, and he said he was going to set up a desk at the presidency to receive reports, and then if it is established that a particular assembly conduct may have been responsible for the flooding, that particular DC will be sacked and then prosecuted. And that was the end of that announcement. We did not see the setup of that office. Flooding is still ongoing. People are building indiscriminately, creating the platform for these things to happen.
Okay. So at least now we are drawing their attention to the fact that these things must be done. These are all not new things. These are things that should be done regularly. All the points we've listed are not new things. They are things that should be done, on a consistent. But we are being proactive. We are reminding them that these are things they have to do. The rains are coming. So we should, do some of these things too.
But is it negligence on the part of the assembly?
Okay, so
the president.
So you know what? Coming here, one of the things that I tried, or I want us to avoid, is apportioning blame. Yes, each and every one of us has a role to play. I have a role to play. That is why I'm here. The assemblies, the MMDAs have their own roles. Individuals who live in communities have their role. Maybe for somebody, his role is to call the attention of the assembly. The Ministry of Works and Housing also have a role to play. The Roads Authority or the Ministry of Roads and Highways also have the authority. We can all work in concert to resolve, or at least to mitigate the action of flooding, or the impact of flooding. Yes, flooding may come, and I just gave you an example of what has happened in other areas. But I didn't finish with my statement on China. When I asked, they said, and actually I read that they have what they call a flooding season. You go to the US, they have hurricane season. It's come to be part of their ecosystem.
Right.
But then what do they do about it?
We'll come back to exhaust the recommendations and then maybe the way forward. But let me bring in Mr. George, he's the Director of Communications at the National Disaster Management Organization, and he joins us via Zoom. Mr. Isi, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the pause. Good afternoon. And I'm just wondering, we had some rain this morning, and from the prediction coming from the Met, we are likely to see more this year. NADMO, always at as one of the first respondents when we have this issue of flooding. How prepared are we that this year we will not dominate the headlines? Mr. IC, if you can kindly unmute for me so we can hear you loud. All right, so we'll bring Mr. IC back on. We'll get his attention and then hear from him NADMO's preparation towards what is likely to be another cycle of lamentation. But let's walk through the other recommendations that you have, especially for the public.
Okay. So then we can put that up.
Yes, exactly. And then we'll wait and bring that on your screen right now. The other recommendations that the Ghana Institution of Engineering they've made as we look forward to the floods. We've spoken about it. It says so you want education collaboration with the National Disaster Management Organization for that extensive public education.
Yes, so what we are saying is that the MMDAs and the NADMO should create the awareness among the communities. Give them the information that is helpful to them to prepare for these floods when they come. So if there are areas in flood-prone areas, let them know that these areas are flood-prone. And also designate the safe havens so that they can move to those areas when their localities get flooded. So all these kind of information needs to be passed on to the various communities. And also, we need to get them information ahead. If the weather forecast is such that there are going to be heavy rains, let us get it to them. We can send out mass text messages to certain localities. I think the district assembly, some of them send bills by mass text messages. These are ways they can communicate to their residents.
The element of climate change, how, as a country, are we ready for it? Are we taking cognizance of the fact that it is a factor that we must address?
Yeah. Well, so
in view of what is happening around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Climate change is real. And as I did mention, if we look at weather pattern, in terms of, heat, in terms of rainfall and all the other elements, they are not as they were some years ago. And we are having, high intensity rainfalls. They are longer duration, and they are causing much more problems than they were in the past. Right. So it is something that, as a nation,
we need to deal with. I'll come to ask you about how do we explain what happened in Dubai. But let me quickly bring in Mr. George GhIE. George GhIE is Director of Communication with NADMO. Mr. GhIE, it's a pleasure to have you here on the pulse. We are discussing flooding. The expectation is that this year it will not make the headlines. But from NADMO point of view, how prepared are you to deal with this? Should you find yourself as one of the first respondents? Yes, besides, if you can hear me, I was asking from NADMO's point of view, what is being done as the rain begins to set in?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I listened to the engineers. What I want to put on record is that NADMO has a flood hazard map. We have a flood hazard map. So we know the areas that are flooded or likely to be flooded when there are heavy rains. And so that's for the record. NADMO, again, partners assemblies to do the silting and dredging of the major drains and the other smaller drains. So that is, I agree with them. It should be a continuous, and we've said time without number that we need to do continuous dredging and desilting. That's the only way that the drains will be ready and respond appropriately when the rains set in. Otherwise, as they said, as the flood waters go, they carry the sand and soil with them, and as the velocity reduces, they begin to settle and the siltation takes place. So you can see the drains almost silted because of sand, not because there are some other debris and go thrown into the water. Again, the 2015 reports, the twin disaster reports, there's a recommendation of construction of retention ponds, and as the engineer said, which then will be spilled gradually after the rains and to reduce the flooding. Yes, NADMO, we do community engagements for the records again. we have identified places we call safe havens,
right,
especially in flood-prone areas. And then we have also conscientized and sensitized people within the communities where those identified safe havens are on how to assess these safe havens. And so, yes, these are engagements that go on within the localities, and there's continuous engagement so that people know where the safe havens are and how to assess them in times of the rains and flooding.
I know that your role primarily is to manage disasters, but you can be more effective in your role if you get the collaboration you need from, for example, the regional coordinating council and the district coordinating councils. As you make your recommendations to them, what exactly do you expect from them as we tread this road?
Yeah, the district chief executive of every district is the chairman of the district disaster management committee.
Right.
The regional minister is the chairman of the regional disaster management committee. And so mostly, almost all NADMO offices are located within the district assemblies offices. And so that is it. We work in partnership with them. There are certain decisions that ought to be taken, which NADMO is not clothed with the powers to so take those decisions. And so when we identify such problems, we defer it to the district assembly because they are clothed with the powers to take such decisions. For instance,
like
if
what?
somebody builds our new Act 927 empowers us to to take steps to demolish or whatever. But then since we don't have the legislative instrument to so enforce those things, we cannot take action. So we have to defer to the district assembly who are clothed with the powers to take those actions. So we work in partnership with the assemblies. And when there are some drains that are choked, and when there are some drains that are collapsed, some time ago I was invited to the Paloma area. Major drains in those areas had caved in. The walls that were protecting the drains had caved in. So we went in to look at it, and we had to send a report to the AMA to take action on those ones. So we work in partnership with the assemblies. Where NADMO does not have the power to so act, and the assemblies do, we make the recommendations to them to so act.
And I can imagine the frustration you go through when you are limited in enforcing some of the things that you really want to enforce. But do you get the support of the assemblies, especially when you have to demolish a structure that may be posing a danger to a lot more people?
Yes, but we have to operate within the laws. And so if you read the new act, there are very, very advanced, forward-looking powers that have been given to NADMO. However, until and unless the LI comes in, for instance, if you, the host, you've acquired your land and you need to construct your building, a disaster officer must come and assess the land, whether the kind of building you want to put up there. I believe the engineers also do that. Whether it's good for the soil texture to carry that building. Is it 1 story, 2 stories, and co? When we do that certification, then we can clear you to go ahead and build. And when you build and you want to habit it, before the habitation, an officer will come and then inspect it and say, yes, indeed, it's good for habitation. All these powers are there, given to NADMO, but we cannot utilize it until there is an ally, and you're right. So sometimes we work in partnership with the Institute of Engineers as well. There are certain things we need to, for instance, the structural integrity of buildings. When you have buildings in areas that are cracked and cool, and we need to recommend to the assembly to pull them down.
All right, but my final question will be, eventually resources will be a key matter in this enterprise.
Before you can take the final report to the assembly to act on it. So we work in partnership with them.
Do you have enough resources this year?
Resources, yes. You see, government has been retooling us in terms of getting the equipment that we need to function properly, like water pumping machines, the dormer machines for cutting trees that are felled, and all that. It's something, but resource in terms of relief supplies and co, there's more to be done because we have about 4 warehouses here in the capital, and then all the 16 regions, we have depots that we call where we do pre-positioning of relief items. Our 4 warehouses are not completely filled to capacity. And so when there is an emergency, we need to get restocking. And then the pre-positioning too, we need to do pre-positioning in all regional capitals before the rains set in. They've started, but the main rains and the ones that cause havoc set in so that we can help victims who have been affected. So we need to get more resources to be properly positioned to respond adequately to the disaster matters.
My pleasure, Mr. GhIE, Director of Communication with NADMO. Thank you very much for your time. And as we come back to the studio to wrap it up with my friends from the engineering, Ghana Institution of Engineering. So, I mean, the minister says we are late. NADMO says, well, we'll do what we can do. You've made your predictions and advised accordingly. What should be the way forward, sir? Let me start with Mr. President.
Well, our residents and those who live within these areas, they really do know. They don't need a map, which is good, but at least they are aware of what happens every year. My advice is to them is that they should be cautious and take their own destiny into their hands. They should not move, in flood waters. When they see the floods coming, if there's a need to relocate, they should relocate, especially during this rainy season.
What about some human activity that contribute to this and lack of political will to enforce the rules and regulations? People build in waterways and they are allowed to have their life because of maybe political connection here and there.
Yeah, well, we are in an emergency. That's what I have to say. We are in an emergency. Those are issues that would have to be dealt with at a much later date. But whilst we wait for the bigger things to be done, let us take our destinies into our hands. If you have drains in front of your house that can be desilted by yourself, please go ahead. Don't wait for the assembly to come. That's the way I want us to look at it. And for those of us who drive, sometimes you see floodwaters and you think that you have a big car, you're going to drive through. Some people have lost their lives as a result of that. Let us be mindful that water is very, very powerful. And we do not have to play with our lives.
Mr. Nyante.
Yes. So just like he said, we should be aware of the dangers that can be posed by these floodwaters and take appropriate measures to protect ourselves. I believe that the media can also help us sensitize the public so that they know what to do in these times and stay safe.
All right, thank you very much, President of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, and of course, Mr. Nyante. Last week...
He's also an engineer.
He's also an engineer. Last week, you had issues with the Ashanti, the matters happening in Kumasi. There was a deadline for the minister to apologize, which is ending today.
Yeah.
What will be your expectation?
Well, we haven't heard anything.
The minister hasn't apologized. The matter is still before the police.
Yeah.
The ECG staff said they will wear red armbands to show their displeasure. They've asked their managers in the Ashanti region not to cooperate with the regional minister, including not attending regional security council meetings until this matter is resolved.
Yes. So I think the engineering council is involved,
and
they are dealing with it. So I'm sure the minister will do the needful. Everything.
The time is almost 1 hour more for the apology to come through. But I'd like to say thank you very much for coming through this afternoon.
Thank you.
And so we've been talking about flooding and what we need to do with the onset of the rains. The Ghana Institution of Engineering, they've made some recommendations to government. The minister says we may be late. NADMO says it is ready. But you have a responsibility to protect yourself if you find yourself in such a situation. We'll take it.